Hi there, welcome to Dead End Street. I'm Al. I'm here with Bry. We are continuing with our new series, the top five hard rock or metal albums of each year. We started off last episode with 1980, moving on to 1981. We're having a little bit of fun with this because this isn't generally the stuff we listen to very often, but this is the stuff that we generally grew up with that kind of helped us form our love of music. And going back and looking at this, some of the albums that I thought were going to be my favorites from that year, going back and listening to them, I'm like, yeah, no, I don't really like that
Like,
anymore. That's a step too far for me. But I found some stuff that I think I'm pretty happy with on my list. How about you?
yeah, about the same. There was some things I probably maybe years ago had been on my list for these years that had been deleted from my library, and when I thought about maybe adding it back, I was like, no, no, there's a
Yeah,
reason that got deleted from the library.
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, well, let's see. Let's get started here on 1981. What do you got for number five?
All right, number five. Number five was a late addition for me. I took something off, something got bumped to six, and for number five, we have Motley Crue's "Too Fast for Love."
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a good a debut album. I think it's the reason that got moved up is because I think of just how revolutionary that album was for that type of music, and they pretty much started a genre and lit everything on fire for that whole LA rock scene, that club scene. They just pretty much set the bar, and
For
everyone else,
better or for worse.
for better or for worse, you know, cringy moments, questionable stories. We all watched the nice Netflix rock
Oh God, no, I couldn't
documentary.
do it. I couldn't
It's
do it.
it was
That
something.
was one step too far for me. I couldn't watch the. That was too much. All right, so I'm going to start off with a caveat here because we have some overlap. As you guys know, so some of the regular viewers who watch the channel know that I have done a top 25 albums of the year for each year in the 80s. I'm now working on the 70s, and there's a band that I featured on my alt rock list that I'm not going to include on my hard rock list because they'll dominate the whole decade. And that's Hanoi Rocks. Hanoi Rocks to me is not a metal band. They're not a hard rock band. I always said they were closer to uh, a punk or new wave type of band. So that being said, everyone who sees the shirt and wonders, well, why doesn't he have Hanoi Rocks? Because they're on the other, they're on the other countdown. So going for it, number five for me is going to be Special Forces by Alice Cooper.
Mm.
Um, so, I think a lot of people quit on Alice after the 70s, they just because he wasn't. All right. So for me, Alice Cooper is more than just a hard rock guy. He's more than just a shock rock. I think there's a little bit more thought put into his music than that. I think he's an artist. I think he's not afraid to try new things. Which is why I liked this early 80s period for Alice. He turns his back kind of like on the hard rock thing because he, wants to try other things. So he's moved into like the synth pop new wave experimental road here with this. I think the songs are more interesting and more exciting than his later 80s stuff, which I think was pretty awful for the most part. And I love Alice, and I'm saying that. It wouldn't have been it would have been cool to see how if he would have continued down this road instead of trying to catering to his old fans, to the old school fans. But it is what it is. Who do we think we are? Who do you think we are? Skeletons in My Closet is a great song. Um, you Want It, You Got It, and Vicious Rumors are my favorite songs in the album. Yeah, Special Forces, Alice Cooper.
All right, so we're at number four. My number four. It's odd for me saying this would be number four because I think when I was younger, this probably would have been my one or two. It's just one of those classic bands with a classic album that anyone into rock knows and loves. That's going to be For Those About to Rock. and that's probably a fitting album title name for 1981. Because there was a lot of people that, were getting into it and they were about to rock throughout the 80s. So it started off with an 81, but there's about the rock. Can't go wrong. Great album. I think everyone knows it. Everyone loves it. Good stuff.
But
Always liked the title song, and I know a lot of people say it's overplayed, it's big. I mean, it's seeing them do that live and having like the cannons going off. It's like one of those things that gives you a chill. It's a great song, great song. So I liked almost probably one of those deep cuts, but I liked the Night of the Long Knives too.
wow, my number 4 is going to be the second album by the Michael Schenker Group called MSG. Yeah, so this is Michael Schenker quits UFO in the late 70s. He on the second album he keeps Gary Barden, which is the original vocalist on the first album, and he brings in former UFO bandmate Paul Raymond on keyboards. And the key to this album was bringing in Cozy Powell to play drums.
Mhm.
This album is monster riff after monster riff. Um, Gary Barden to me is as good as just about any of the other 80s, early 80s rocks vocalists. He wrote great hooks. Lyrics were okay. I mean, some were downright bad, but for 1981 hard rock, I mean, you're not gonna get a lot of cliches and stuff, but the album is great. On and On is a great song, but I Want More, Let Sleeping Dogs Lie are my two favorite songs in the album. And overall, even though I think he gets a lot of credit from actual guitar players, I think regular hard rock and metal music listeners, I think I think Michael Schenker deserves a little bit more credit than he gets for the sound of like 80s guitar sound.
Right,
But
right.
that's just me.
Number 3. These top 3 for me could have went in any order. It's a little rough. It was a little hard. This is probably a band that's gonna. Some of these bands may be in, especially a lot of my early 80s list. They're gonna probably make every top 5, top 10, everything I got. So for me, number 3 is Breaker by Accept.
Ooh, okay.
Also a classic, and for me, it's every song in the album is fantastic, and that is not something that comes up for a lot of Accept fans. They'll think balls at a wall. You see them, another song here or there, but some of these songs have remained a staple in their live show for their entire existence. So it's
Mhm.
I think everyone, if you think about it, if you've seen them live, you've heard them play Son of a Bitch. Run If You Can, fantastic. The opening track, Starlight, that just it just sets the tone for the album. And you know what? I always like the ballad towards the end, the breaking up again.
We're to my number 3, and we're gonna have a little bit of overlap. I was wondering how many overlap albums we'd have throughout this entire decade.
Uh-huh.
This might be one of like maybe 3 for the entire decade. So number 3 is going to be Too Fast for Love by Motley Crue.
Ah,
So before Motley became a behind the music cliche, they were actually a damn good glam rock, hard rock band with a punk attitude. Um, they're one of the very few that started their own label, their own DIY label, Leather Records. This album was recorded independently and released on their own label before signing with Elektra Records. And that became the thing to do in LA after that. Um, they give Van Halen gets a lot of credit for the Sunset Strip thing, which I guess they should because they were the first. But I think Motley really kind of kicked off the dirty Sunset Strip. And I mean, and they became a different band after this because after they signed with Elektra came the next phase of the band, which is like their heavy metal occult phase. So they were only really a like glam metal punk band for one album, you know? And I think they were really queer at the beginning, closer to the New York Dolls than they were Van Halen. Um,
Right.
so, I mean, for me, obviously Live Wire, but I think three of the all-time best Motley Crue songs, and I mean, after the first few years, there wasn't very many anyway. But
Mhm.
Starry Eyes, I think, is a great song. On with the Show was great. The Nicky's lyrics on that were really, really good. And Merry Go Round are probably four of the best Motley songs ever recorded. Full stop. So
Nice.
yeah, well, that for me was also one of the first albums that I got that wasn't. So growing up, meaning I was in the when I was a little kid, I was in the Kiss and Aerosmith and Alice and Led Zeppelin, but those were bands that like I got into from like my dad or my uncle.
Mhm.
Motley Crue, was the first band that I got into that was my band. You know what I mean? Even though
Yeah.
I was like 8 or 9 years old, you know, no one got me into them. I got it. They were like
Yeah,
my band.
yeah. I could probably say the same thing about Crew. It might have been I probably heard Shout at the Devil first, but it was yeah, there was no one telling me to like that.
Mhm.
Number two for me also, I mean, most of these are going to be classics for most people who would be tuning in to check any of this out, but it's going to be Killers by Iron Maiden. So the dear departed Paul Di'Anno makes our list again with a classic follow-up, a sophomore attempt at probably a lot of bands, maybe their second album. You're like, I mean, some are fantastic, but the first Maiden album, Killers, for me, you could hear the progression in Killers, how they got a little tighter, a little more refined, maybe a little further away from their early punkish metal sound, but I mean, it's such a solid album, and it's such a good classic sound. And unlike sound wise, production wise, songwriting wise, unlike any other Maiden album, I think. And you can kind of, for those who saw, heard what was coming, if you listen to Number of the Beast and you listen to Killers, you can see how it easily just took the next step once Bruce joined. Good stuff.
Nice.
Hmm.
Okay, so my number two, I had to really kind of juggle these two here and figure out which one I was going to put at number one. So number two is going to be Mob Rules by Black Sabbath. Um, is it as good as Heaven and Hell? My opinion, it's a little bit of a step down, not much. It's really kind of the same formula anyway. Um, it was a really tall order to ask anyway, but this is the first album without Bill Ward on drums. Vinny Appice comes in and does more than fine. There's just more crushing guitars, more great melodies, more ominous imagery. Um, and to me, I mean, I know we're going forward through this. Like I think your purist metal fans will start to be like, dude, the way I look at metal is different, I think, than what a purist metal person would think, because I'm looking for songwriting. So
Right.
this album to me and Heaven and Hell both epitomize good songwriting in it just happens to be hard rock. For me, though, I think Voodoo, great riff, over and over, fantastic vocal performance by Ronnie. And I know that a lot of Sabbath fans do not like Country Girl, but I think it's a great song.
It's a
So,
good song. It's good stuff.
Mob
Nice.
Rules, number
That's
two.
that's a fantastic album. A side note for me, that maybe for me was probably the first time I heard Ronnie James Dio.
Nice.
Yeah, I wasn't, I'm sure as I was young and getting into rock and was a Sabbath fan. I don't think I fully appreciated what they did and accomplished in a lot of their stuff until I got a little older. I was like, they were a classic rock band and pay attention. And when I first heard Mob Rules, I was like, this band rocks. This is really good stuff. And for a good while in my youth, that may have been my favorite Sabbath album of
Nice.
all of them. So that's good stuff.
Nice.
Ooh. So we're at number one,
Numero
huh?
uno.
Numero uno for me. I think you know what this is going to be. I mean, early 80s for me, there's really a couple bands there that really shine. And I had to kind of think and look at my library and decide what came out when and if it was still acceptable. But for me, Number one is going to be like my number one of the early 80s. It's the just fantastic all around album by Riot, Fire Down Under.
Oh, yeah, of course, Jesus.
Just
I did. Yeah.
amazing in every respect, beginning to end. We have rest in peace to both Guy and Mark, who is Riot. They gave us this gift that you'll have a lot of people talk about, maybe a little forgotten, a lot of stories you hear, a lot of the bands that everyone knows and loves. You have it like Anthrax and Metallica and other bands that playing on festivals with them. I even heard a story about how Anthrax was trying to get Guy to be their singer once they heard he was leaving music. It was just so influential for so many people. And there's a reason you can listen to that album beginning to end, every song, and it has a something. It's magic. It's good. Anyone that doesn't know Riot or maybe remembers their later 80s speed metal or their 90s 2000s adult rock metal, which of course I love, but visit that, listen to Fire Down Under, and it's just a classic. It's a crying shame it is not on like regular radio rotation as being a classic from the era. It's just fantastic.
Side note, when I hear that album, it's almost always when you're around. Because
Yeah, yeah, sure.
when we were growing up, you were always the giant Riot fan, and I was like, eh. But this particular Riot album, I do have to say, was the one that I found the most listenable. And um, just a real quick story. When we were about 15, 16, a buddy of ours ran away from home,
Mhm.
stole his father's car, and we went out joyriding in his car. And they had a cassette deck in the car, so I think his dad had something terrible in the cassette deck that we totally were not into. So no
Mhm.
one had anything on it except for you. The only thing that we had to listen to was Riot Fire Down Under. So you threw it into the tape deck, and on that frigid November night with the windows down, driving down I-95 here in Philadelphia, sitting in the back with a bulldog spitting all over me and icicles hanging from my face.
Mhm.
I remember hearing Outlaw by Riot playing.
Yeah, good stuff.
So,
Of,
so
of
when you say Fire Down Under, that's what I think of when I think of
yeah.
Fire Down Under.
Of course,
So
for several years and throughout the 80s, that cassette was always in my inside pocket of my denim jacket.
you put it right behind your pocket protector.
Yes, yes. Yes, 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 with probably the Slayer patch on the outside.
Oh God. Okay, so we're at number one. Okay,
You're at number
so
one.
my number one is going to be Moving Pictures by Rush.
Mm.
Um, Now, when I was, you know, my early teens, I think Rush was a little bit over my head. Um, but I have lots and lots of great nostalgia attached to these early Rush records because for both of us growing up in lower Northeast Philly, at the time, there was a lot of guys who were a little bit older than us, you know, out washing their cars, hanging out in the street and everything. And generally, the soundtrack was basically Rush, Journey, AC/DC, So when I hear moving pictures, it makes me think of bike riding, Atari, sleeveless t-shirts, and ice cream trucks. So,
Which is
but
all good thing.
yes. But besides that, the songs have stood the test of time. And I think for Rush, it took guts to go this far away from their 1970s prog shit. It was pretty epic to do that. And I think a lot of their fans were pissed. But I don't think they gave much of a shit. Um, because the one thing I do have to mean is there are a lot of hard rock fans are appreciative of all kinds of music. But for the most part, a lot of hard rock and metal guys don't like when their bands try new things. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's pretty frowned upon. And for Rush to pull this off was pretty crazy for them. They wanted to tip their toe in reggae, so they did. They wanted to dip their toe in new wave, so they did. They soaked the entire record in synthesizers. I mean, the guitars generally kind of started going into the background after this for a few years. And for Rush, this album plays like a greatest hits album. I mean, there's Tom Sawyer, Red Barretto, YYZ, and the ultimate 1981 opening riff for me is Limelight. As soon as I hear it, it takes me right back. And of course, you have Neil Peart's like thoughtful lyrical content. A complete disregard for musical boundaries. Somehow, they became megastars by doing this,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they had to play arenas and
that is an
stadiums going
exception.
forward. Of course, all those great hits, but don't sleep on Camera Eye or Witch Hunt. Side 2 is just as good as side 1. And all this talk of moving pictures made me want to go eat a bowl of Count Chocula and play Defender. So
Nice.
yeah, so that's it for 1981 for us. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you like what you've watched so far, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit this bell for notifications. We do a lot of things in this channel. If you like classic alt rock, or if you like post punk, or if you like 70s glam rock, if you like 80s hard rock, we got a little bit for everyone on here. We got a lot of things coming up. Obviously, Brian and I will continue going forward this little top 5 albums of the year for hard rock. Hopefully you guys like it. We have a album rankings for Psychedelic Furs coming up in the next couple of weeks. I just did a album ranking for Mott the Hoople, the classic 70s glam rock band. I know Brian could give less of a shit. And one of my favorite bands. It was fun to do. And yeah, so check us out on all our social media too. Put the links in the description. And thanks a lot. Thanks for watching Dead End Street. See you next time. Bye.